Hey everybody, really excited for the show today. I've got Joseph Polanin. He's a award-winning CEO, a combat veteran, an author, and he's also going to join me here on the Indispensable conversation. The man is an absolute leadership expert. If you've seen any of his stuff, you've learned from him, which makes him the best possible person on the planet to help us confront the following question: is it on leaders to make their people happy? Welcome to the show, Joe.
Jim, thanks so much for your very kind and gracious introduction. It's my absolute honor and privilege to be here with you today and have this conversation.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it, man. So let's jump right in.
Yeah,
Joe, is it on leaders to make their people happy? What do you think?
no, it's not. That being said, it's important for everyone listening in today and those who are leaders, those who aspire to become great leaders, and for new leaders just starting out. It is not incumbent upon you to make people happy. However, it is your duty, it's your responsibility, and you are ultimately accountable for creating, sustaining, and improving an environment where people can thrive,
Yeah,
where there is an environment of individual and collective success. This is the intangible element. Some people call it the workplace. I think that definition has changed over the decades, and it will continue to evolve and change what we call the workplace. It's not a physical location. It's an attitude, it's a mindset, and it's an environment where leaders, great leaders at all levels in the chain of command, create this, sustain it, and improve it. And it's just this. People know that they're cared for, they know that they're valued, they know that they're respected and that their voice counts. They know that they have an opportunity to build trust with their teammates, trust with their leaders and managers. And in my experience, such a team is unstoppable. So while it's not on the leader to make people happy, in my experience, creating and sustaining an environment such as the one I just described, happiness is a byproduct because people get up in the morning and they're
sure.
excited
Yeah,
and they're fired up and they want to be part of that team. They want to move the ball forward for the mission and vision of the organization. And in my experience, that's a huge component of happiness.
yeah, I'm with you, and I do agree that leaders are about, or should be about anyway, creating that supportive and sort of respectful work environment that you describe. And it also includes things like, providing necessary resources, guidance, recognition for success, all those kinds of things. Um, Here's another question. Don't you think the idea of leaders being responsible for making their employees happy is really kind of an unrealistic expectation, despite all the stuff we see in the trade press, despite all the posts on LinkedIn and Twitter and all that about, oh, my boss is making me miserable and I'm not happy and all that. I mean, should that even be an expectation a person should have when they go to work each day?
No, as a leader, no, that is, as you described it, an unrealistic expectation for many of the reasons that we just discussed, right? I believe in opportunity. I believe that everyone, whether an employee, a teammate, a team member, a manager, a leader, everyone has a unique and really unmitigated and open and free opportunity to succeed. I believe that we as individuals manufacture and create our own happiness by
Mm,
what we decide to do. Right? I'm extremely happy to be in this conversation with you
mhm,
today.
mhm,
I wanted to be here. I made a conscious decision to do that. And employees and managers and leaders at all levels, in all kinds of companies, in every industry and sector, do that every day.
mhm.
There's an element, as you described, of personal responsibility and personal accountability.
Mhm.
I've made a decision and I've made a commitment to be involved in this activity today. And if it makes me happier to do that, then I want to continue doing that.
Yeah,
It is not an entitlement. It is not
sure.
something that a leader or someone who simply by their position that they're in is all of a sudden immediately responsible and accountable to deliver
Yeah.
to people. Here's happiness on a plate.
Yeah, I'm with you, Joe. I mean, I feel like, you know, what could happen if we allow this sort of mindset to really take root is you're going to create a culture where employees expect constant happiness. And when they become dissatisfied, then you've got all kinds of challenges and setbacks that your organization is going to have to confront because morale is down. People are feeling like, well, my boss is supposed to make me happy. I'm not happy today, so I'm not going to put my best effort in. Um, and I think, you know, the notion that leaders being obligated to make people happy comes with some unexpected consequences, right? I mean, what do you think about some of those consequences if we're allowed to let people think this way?
Right? You hit on a few of them, and I'd like to expand
Yeah.
upon that thinking, which I agree with you completely. So anyone who's in business, anyone who works in just about any company in any sector, public, private, nonprofit, there are no secret formulas for success. There's no easy path to achieving your vision and delivering excellence every day for your customers and your clients. There will be problems, there will be obstacles, there will be challenges.
Mhm.
To have either an expectation or perhaps even a directive that says that people are going to be happy all the time, not only is it unrealistic, but it will make a team that thinks that way falter when they encounter a crisis,
Yeah.
a challenge, or even chaos. However, if that team lives in a space of what I refer to as principled realism, you have a set of core values and core principles that you live by, you build the respect and trust we talked about earlier, and you live in realism where you see what happens for what it is and you encounter these obstacles and challenges. A team like that, they're going to be okay when they hit a roadblock.
Yeah.
A team that expects to be happy every day, it will falter and will experience even more challenges that exacerbate down the line. Not only will they not be able to handle that challenge, but there will probably be some adverse second and third order effects when it comes to
Yeah.
their ability to manage resources or just to get the basic mission requirements done every day, set aside the challenge.
Yeah. I mean, again, and you and I, we talked a little bit before we got on live here. I mean, you know, we correspond quite a bit on LinkedIn, and all of the content that you share, resonates with me. And I feel oftentimes I'll see one of your posts and I go, wow, yeah, that's exactly right, Joe. Rock on, man. It's that you hit the nail on the head. But I think that if we allow people to kind of get into that, you know, to me, it's a destructive kind of mindset, expecting to be happy every day, or that your boss is going to make you happy. I think it makes people less responsible and less resilient. The individual has a choice, as you mentioned. It's up to each one of us to take on the responsibility of managing our own well-being and finding satisfaction at work. It's not really on the boss, on the leader. And additionally, I think that, you know, if you feel this way, if you feel like it's someone else's job to make you happy, then you don't feel obligated to self-regulate or practice any of the other resilience behavior that we know is important to be able to overcome the challenges that we face every day at work, you know? So, I don't know. I'm going to try to forge this into a question, but I guess it's around, leaders should create a support and respective work environment, right? As we mentioned. Doesn't the feeling to go further than that cross a line? I don't know. What do you think?
I think there are ways, and I wouldn't necessarily call it crossing a line, but there's a term that at one point gained some traction within the military about 15 years ago, and it was called intrusive leadership.
Mm,
Intrusive was probably the wrong adjective But the notion was care about people genuinely, authentically, be curious to know what their perspectives and what their issues and what their challenges are. In short, get to know your people.
Mm.
And when they have a problem that may prevent them from either working well on the team, accomplishing the mission, or perhaps even, as you said, creating their own self-control, self-regulation that enables their own happiness.
Mm.
When there's a problem, demonstrate that you care. You can't write about it. You can't talk about it. You have to be there for that person. You may not agree with every single point of view that they have, and they may not agree with every single point of view that you have. But as a leader, exercise, I'll replace the adjective intrusive with caring, exercise caring leadership. I don't believe that's crossing a line, because I believe that's genuinely caring for your people, wanting to know what's important to them, why it's important to them, and mobilizing that initiative as a catalyst to not only help develop them as a future leader individually, but to help the team collectively. I've seen that work many times. I'd like to share a brief story with you.
Yeah.
2008, I was still on active duty at that point. I was the commanding officer of a unit analogous to being the CEO, and many of the units that were under our command, as is typical in the military, have to go through a rigorous pre-deployment preparation and a series of inspections to make sure that they are safe to deploy in any environment. At this time, we were preparing teams to go to war, where the crucible of combat was going to test them in ways that we could not duplicate completely in the training environment, right? So we had a team that had this environment. I believe they had this environment that was conducive to individual and collective success. And none of the leaders crossed a line, as you talked about, but they knew what the strengths and weaknesses of their people were.
That's critical.
Oh, absolutely. There was
Yeah.
a very senior and very seasoned operator that we're in the middle of this inspection, 3 o'clock in the morning, because we tried to test people at different times, because you never know what's going to happen. And this very senior seasoned operator, who was in a leadership role, was about to make an egregious mistake.
Mm.
And it would have not only failed the inspection, it would have called into question their ability and competency to deploy. There was a very junior member of the team that had been with the team maybe 3 months, basic level of qualification. And he went over to the leader and he said, I think you're about to make a mistake. I would recommend that you do this. And he said, oh, no, I've got it, I'm good. Well, because they had that environment, that junior member felt empowered to go back a second time and a third time, until that senior leader listened and said, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm going to fix that right now. Now, of course, they passed, flying colors, they did well. But what if they didn't have that environment?
Wow.
And what if that junior member didn't have that self-control, self-regulation, and empowerment, and felt confident enough to go to that senior leader with something that he was telling him he was doing the wrong thing?
Yeah.
And I reflect upon that often, because that's the team that I always want to be with.
Yeah. No, I hear you, man. I mean, wow, there's just a lot in there. The good news and all that is the culture, right? That the junior person felt that it was okay to speak truth to power, right? That
100%.
that's not true everywhere. We know that, right? And I think leaders do have a responsibility to craft that kind of a culture, because now you're all in it together. And there's no, you respect rank, yes, but when it comes to decision making, to overcoming, the challenges in the workplace and all that, you want everyone working together, as a team. Because, back to the question, leaders have all kinds of responsibilities. They've got to achieve the organizational goals. They've got to manage the resources. They've got to make tough decisions. And sometimes those responsibilities and the way leaders need to behave and operate would not necessarily align with every employee's personal happiness. Right? Getting up at 3 in the morning in the story you just told probably didn't make everybody happy.
Nope,
But
exactly
it had
right.
to be done, and it was about preparedness and about making sure that, you know, in a do or die situation, everybody's ready. And
Absolutely.
and I think that's where this notion of, well, I need to be happy at work and it's my boss's job to do that, is kind of, I don't know, out of place. Let's pull on the thread a little bit more.
Sure.
Clearly employee happiness is influenced by a combination of factors, right? So it's their individual preferences. Maybe somebody likes to get up at 3 in the morning, so they were really happy to do that.
Yeah.
Personal circumstances, life outside of work. How much should leaders be expected to influence those aspects of employee happiness?
Yeah, I definitely think that there is a line, as you mentioned. Um, I don't think it's incumbent upon leaders to ensure that the personal lives and the home life or the elements of daily living that are very close to each individual um, are influenced directly by the leader.
Yeah.
I think that that particular there's a respect there for an individual's privacy. Now, if the individual comes to the leader and says, "Hey, I have a problem, and I'd like to talk to you about it," 100% of the time, I'm going to listen, and I'm going to um, make sure that I'm doing so in a way where I'm listening to understand their perspective, not listening to provide a response. Many times, my experience has been that team members, managers, leaders at all levels, everyone needs someone to listen to them.
Hmm.
And they may come forward with a personal problem or something that's happening at home, and they don't actually want you to do anything.
Yeah.
They just want you to listen.
Just want to be heard. Yeah.
Exactly. And creating that type of environment is very important. There may or may not be something that can be done. If there is something that can be done and it's helpful to the individual, um, then I think that's a good thing to do. But there certainly is a line of respect and privacy that I think without the individual coming forward and seeking help from the leader, there certainly is a line that I would not, as I get to know people and as I care about people and as I develop relationships, there are going to be informal social gatherings. There are going to be team building activities where
Mhm.
we get to know people and their families
Sure.
outside of work, and that's fantastic and that's wonderful. But there is a line of personal space that I respectfully would
Sure.
say no. I'm not. It's not the leader's job at the organization to jump into that personal space uninvited and say, "Here's what I'm going to do to make you happy today."
Right. Yeah. No. Like you said, there's privacy issues. We've got to respect everyone's privacy, and like we've been talking about, there's a boundary there.
Mhm.
Um, I think a lot of workplace drama comes when that boundary is broken. It's that, and it can be subtle things. It could be, you and I are personal friends, and now we were in a situation where I've got to, maybe invoke mandatory overtime. But because you're my friend, everybody else on the team has overtime, but you're okay if you need to, go take care of a personal matter or whatever. But no one else gets that latitude, right? And you see it all the time. And what happens is it really shifts the culture to one where, okay, I've got to be friends with the boss or I'm not going to get treated well or as well as his friends are, that kind of thing. So it can be a really sort of slippery slope if a leader lets themselves sort of get on that track down the mountain. Um,
Exactly
shift,
right.
Shifting gears, even if we were to say leaders should aim to make their people happy, is that even the right goal to have?
No, and I'll tell you why I think the answer is no. It goes back to something that we said earlier with respect to that team's resolve and capacity to thrive in a crisis, a catastrophe, or perhaps even a
Yeah.
chaotic environment. There will be times, as sure as we're talking right now, there will be times when organizations, companies, teams will face challenges, they will face problems, they may even face a crisis situation. And the phrase keep calm and carry on comes to mind.
Mm.
In those situations, there's no expectation of happiness, nor is there a requirement on the part of the leader to deliver happiness. There's a requirement to, in some cases, save people's lives. In other cases, mitigate further damage from the crisis or the chaos that has ensued, and minimize risk. And there are all kinds of risk. And I know we could talk about risk for hours, but in a situation like that, if the goal is to make people happy, then how does that team that you're trying to make happy minimize, mitigate, or when possible, eliminate risk to the mission, risk to people that are on the team? And there are all kinds of risks, financial, physical, proximal. How does the team do that if the goal is to make people happy? There are going to be plenty of times when the risk to the mission outweighs the risk to the individual, and that team is going to have to just grind it out. And if you have that environment that we talked about earlier, what's going to happen, in my experience, is that everybody won't be happy for sure. But what will happen is that team will pull together in ways that you haven't seen before, and they will move mountains to find a way or make one to get through that crisis situation.
Sure.
And that's what I think the goal is in leading teams of all sizes and shapes.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, again, the primary making staffers' happiness the primary goal is just the wrong idea. I'm really disappointed that it's gained so much popularity out there. Like I say, it's covered an awful lot in the trade press, and I think people are mixing other ideas together with that, creating sort of a really dangerous mix of expectations, particularly for younger people entering the workforce who don't know any better.
Correct.
Their expectations are getting skewed by all this. Um, and I also feel like, in regard to the notion of making that the goal, it conflicts with the long-term well-being and personal growth of the employee. I mean, they've got to learn how to face challenges. They've got to learn how to deal with failure and engage in tasks that aren't necessarily immediately gratifying, but, like you say, contribute to the overall success of the team. And I think that's the part that's dangerous. That's the part that's getting lost out there, as we read about and listen to other thought leaders discuss the importance of leaders making their people happy.
Yeah.
Let's go to sort of the actions we can offer listeners and viewers today. How can leaders take steps to make their people more content at work?
Excuse me, Jim. Yes. One of the most powerful ways that I've seen, in addition to what we mentioned earlier, the leader themselves being genuine and authentic, and that leader never displaying what I refer to as a say-do gap. You don't say one thing and do something else. Right? There's no gap. People know and trust and believe that what that leader communicates in writing, what they communicate verbally, what they do, most importantly, what they demonstrate in their actions are exactly the same. The way they live their lives is the way they operate, is the way they lead. There's no difference, right? Yep. So there's a genuineness and an authenticity that's first and foremost. Once that foundation's there, I believe the leader's first and best methodology is to develop people. I have seen wonderful leadership development continuums at organizations, and by no means am I suggesting that there's a course that one can take and there's a cookie cutter approach, and if the team takes that course, everybody's good and everybody's content. I'm not suggesting that at all. But a leadership continuum would be designed for an organization that's customized and tailored to that organization, where there's a certain set of individual study and knowledge mentorship and direct intervention by the leader, and actual practice in the field, in the operational environment for junior leaders,
Yeah,
for those that maybe have been around for several years that are
sure.
getting ready to promote, and for those that are more senior, and then eventually, depending upon the size, scope, and scale of the
Hmm.
company, for the C-suite and the senior people. Everyone commits to this concept, which I believe is 100% true, that
Hmm.
leadership is a process of learning. It's
Yes.
not a position. And
Yeah.
so the best organizations I've seen that have been able to do what you described have that type of continuum. There are going to be informal and formal aspects to it,
Sure.
but there's a roadmap and there's a pathway for people to become better leaders. And they get hungry for it and they get
Yeah.
excited about it and
Sure.
they say, that's what I want to do. And
Sure.
that helps them stay.
Yeah, it's part of the culture, that whole continuum.
100%.
And there's some other, really simple things that I think leaders can do that can help with this too, right? So if we can create a more autonomous, empowered workplace where trust is sort of the centerpiece, I think that's helpful. That makes people more confident, as they successfully execute things, and
Absolutely.
they get guidance from leaders, but they're allowed to kind of do their thing. Feedback and improvement, I think, is another aspect of that culture. You want to encourage a culture where there's continuous improvement, where you're soliciting feedback, and then conflict resolution, right? I think a lot of places want to be happy, and they've got this happy culture. And as a consequence, people get away with some really bad behavior, and there's all kinds of conflicts
Mhm.
in that workplace.
Absolutely.
And if leaders aren't able to step up and feel confident and comfortable addressing those things, then you've got chaos, because people aren't getting along. They're trying to be happy, but they're actually sort of bothering other people on the team because,
That's right.
one person's happiness is someone else's aggravation. So look, we've got about 2 or 3 minutes left, and I really want to be respectful of your time here. So let me ask sort of one last question. How can leaders set the right example when it comes to this stuff, when it comes to happiness at work, if you will? How do they set the standard?
Yeah. So the first way that I mentioned earlier that I believe is tried and true is to be yourself.
Mhm.
This is not a catchphrase, right? Only you can be you. You can't be someone else, so don't try. Smart people will see through that in about 6 seconds. So
Yeah.
always be yourself and be genuine. Right. Number two, care about people. Right. I
Mm.
have a colleague that I respect greatly, and he always says you can't teach people to be curious. And you can't teach people to care about others. You can teach them new skills. You can teach
Yeah.
them new capabilities. You can send them to
Right.
school. They can become brilliant at certain contributions. But you want to be inherently curious and always care about others. And finally, what goes along with that authenticity and caring is being humble. The
Yeah.
leader should walk
Huge.
into the space, the environment, whether it's virtual, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and always have that humble attitude of, I'm not the smartest person in the room. There's always someone who knows more than me. I believe leaders who demonstrate that have the ability to accelerate and become great leaders, and even beyond that, to become elite leaders, because those core values, they're not going away. They're
Yeah.
part of that leader's
Yeah.
DNA. I believe that's the key.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'd add a few more, right? I mean, if you're going to set the example, things like self care
Mhm.
is important too, right? So, you know, exercise, eat right, manage your stress,
Yep.
don't um, overwork. If you're putting in 18 hours a day every day and people feel obligated, like, wow, he gets here at 7, he doesn't leave till 8 o'clock at night. Now I have to do that.
Right?
That's not a healthy example. Maintain a positive attitude, right? And that's sort of a takeoff on some of what you described, right? Show enthusiasm for the work, have a
Absolutely.
positive outlook, even in the toughest situations. And then, of course, express gratitude. And I feel like that's such a simple thing to do, but really, as you say, authentically express gratitude. Say thank you, job well done, celebrate those little victories, and you'll inspire your team. You'll get those folks excited to be there. And they'll accept the times when they're not happy, when they have to do something that doesn't make them happy, but they're going to be high performing.
Yes,
So, hey,
sir.
hey, Joe, thanks so much for making the time today. I really appreciate it. What a great conversation. And I look forward to talking to you more down the road.
Jim, thanks so much. My pleasure, my honor. I appreciate it.
So long.